My name is Carolyn Walker, and I am 62 years old. I've lived long enough to watch life give me both tenderness and cruelty, though nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that would come from the very people I loved most. For decades, I had been a school teacher, a widow for the past 7 years, and the proud mother of one son, David. He was my only child, the reason I worked late hours and saved every penny, the reason I never remarried after losing my husband. I poured all of myself into raising him, believing love was an investment that would never come back empty. A few months ago, I did something mothers often do without hesitation. I gave David everything. My life savings, my security, my years of careful planning. I purchased him and his wife Melanie a house. Not just a down payment, not a loan, but a home entirely paid off, free of debt, no strings attached. I painted the walls with my own hands, chose the colors. Melanie said she liked sewed curtains late into the night. Every piece of that home carried my fingerprints. It was more than money, it was a part of me, a piece of my love turned into bricks and mortar. And yet not long after, I received a text message from David that cracked my heart open like glass shattering across the kitchen floor. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even long. Just a few words glowing on the phone screen. You won't be joining us on the family cruise. Melanie prefers to keep it only family. Only family, and somehow I wasn't part of that definition anymore. I sat in my kitchen that morning, coffee untouched, staring at those words as though they were a foreign language. I typed back only one word: okay. That single word carried all the weight of years of sacrifice, and all the shock of realizing that I had been written out of my own family's story. My mind screamed what my mouth didn't dare say: I was good enough to buy your house, but not good enough to sit at your table, not good enough to travel with you, not good enough to be seen. The walls around me decorated with photographs of family trips. I had fully funded Disneyland when David was 7. Cancun when Melanie first joined our family, the Christmas cabin getaway. I insisted on paying for all. Now looked different. I no longer saw joy. I saw receipts disguised as memories. Each smile in those frames seemed bought, not given freely. It was in that silence that I realized something inside me had cracked, not in weakness, but in awakening. The part of me that always made excuses that softened their cruelty, that accepted scraps of affection in exchange for endless giving, that part was gone. The next day, I called Nancy, my oldest friend, the kind of friend who knows the shape of your heartbreak without asking. She came immediately, sat in my kitchen, and read the text herself. Her jaw tightened, her eyes softened, and she said words I had never admitted to myself. They've been planning this, Carolyn. I wanted to deny it, to say it was just Melanie's influence, that my son couldn't possibly mean to erase me. But Nancy held my hand and told me the truth. I had raised a boy who never had to struggle because I had always been there to fix things. Melanie saw that and shaped it. I had made myself small, useful, indispensable, and in doing so, I had allowed myself to become invisible. Her words stung because they were true. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, I opened my laptop. For years, Melanie had insisted on helping with my online accounts. She said it was easier that way, that I shouldn't worry about technical details. But as I dug deeper, my stomach tightened. Small transfers masked as home repairs or emergency funds had been dripping out of my accounts into ones that weren't mine. They were Melanie's. Quiet, careful, spread out over months so I wouldn't notice. This wasn't neglect, it was theft with a smile. And David, was he blind to it? Or did he simply not care as long as the money flowed? For the first time in my life, I saw them clearly, and I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office. Mr. Harris had handled my affairs for years. I told him everything. I wanted the house transfer reversed. I wanted every account locked, every power of attorney canceled. My voice didn't tremble as I said it. I was calm, steady, resolute. He warned me this would cause tension. I told him the tension had already been there, festering under the surface, waiting for me to notice. That afternoon, for the first time in weeks, my hands didn't shake. They thought I would remain the quiet woman who signed whatever was placed in front of her. They thought I would stay blind. But that woman was gone. In her place stood someone they didn't expect, a woman ready to reclaim her life. 4 days later, as their cruise ship docked, I was waiting. Not in anger, but in clarity. I watched from across the street as David and Melanie returned relaxed and smiling until they saw the moving truck in the driveway of their house. A young couple was unloading boxes, laughing with the realtor. They froze. David's voice wavered as he asked Mom, "What's going on?" I stepped forward calm and steady and said words that had been waiting inside me for years. "It's not your house. Not anymore." For once, silence was mine to give, and that silence was power. David's face that afternoon was something I will never forget, his confusion colliding with anger, his pride battling disbelief. Melanie, ever quick to recover, was the first to speak. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice sugary but sharp. "The house is ours. You gave it to us. You can't just take it back." I held her gaze steady as stone. "I can." And I did. Every signature, every transfer, every gift, you engineered them. You thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. And now it's over. For a moment, the only sound was the laughter of the young couple settling into what had once been their dream. I almost pitied them, standing on the curb with suitcases at their feet, watching the illusion of security vanish. Almost. David's eyes darted between me and the moving truck. "Mom, you can't do this to us. We have kids' responsibilities. You did this to yourselves." I cut in, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "I bought you a home, not so you could erase me, but so you could build a family with love. Instead, you chose greed. You let Melanie bleed my accounts dry while telling me I didn't belong at your table. That was your choice." His jaw clenched. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw regret. But then Melanie grabbed his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear, and his expression hardened again. That night, my phone exploded with messages. Some from David accusing me of betrayal. Some from Melanie dripping with venom, threatening to make sure everyone knew I was unstable, that I was an ungrateful mother destroying her son's life. But I didn't flinch. I had already handed everything to my lawyer. The paper trail was undeniable. The quiet siphoning of funds, the manipulation of documents, the calculated deceit. If they wanted war, I was ready. The following weeks unfolded like a test of endurance. Melanie stormed into the lawyer's office, demanding explanations, only to be met with folders of evidence. Bank statements highlighted in neat yellow, her name appearing again and again where mine should have been. She turned pale, then furious, then coldly silent. David refused to attend those meetings. Instead, he called me late one night, his voice hoarse. "Mom, why are you doing this? You're my mother. We're supposed to be family." I swallowed hard, my heart aching at the word family. "David, family doesn't lie. Family doesn't drain you dry while smiling to your face. Family doesn't send a text saying you're not welcome. That's not family, that's betrayal." He didn't respond. The silence on the other end was deafening. But soon the silence gave way to desperation. I heard from neighbors that Melanie had started selling off jewelry, electronics, even furniture to make ends meet. The cruise they had enjoyed so smugly had left them in debt, and without the safety net of my money, the cracks widened fast. Meanwhile, I discovered something I had long forgotten myself. I began to reclaim not just my finances, but my joy. I signed up for a pottery class at the community center, my hands shaping clay the way I was reshaping my life. I joined a book club, laughing with women who asked nothing from me but my company. I even took a short trip to the coast, breathing in the salt air, and realizing I hadn't traveled for myself in decades, only ever for them. And yet the emotional scars still pulsed. Late at night, I'd stare at old photographs of David as a boy, his gap-toothed smile, his arms wrapped around me, and wonder where that little boy had gone. Had I smothered him with too much giving? Had I failed to teach him boundaries? Was this betrayal somehow my fault? The questions gnawed at me, but I refused to let them rot me from the inside. Instead, I wrote them down in a journal, pouring out every doubt, every rage-filled thought, every memory. And page by page, I felt lighter. But Melanie wasn't done. One afternoon, I returned home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a summons. Melanie had filed a lawsuit claiming I had acted illegally in reclaiming the house, that I was mentally unfit, that I had been manipulated by outside influences. The audacity left me breathless. But when I showed the papers to my lawyer, he smiled grimly. "They're desperate. They know they've lost. This is their last card." The court date was set. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed simply but firmly, a navy dress, my wedding ring still on my finger, and a small cross necklace my late husband had given me. I wasn't there to perform. I was there to tell the truth. Inside the courtroom, Melanie sat stiff, her makeup flawless but her eyes hard as ice. David sat beside her, avoiding my gaze. The judge asked me to speak first. I rose, my voice calm but steady, and told my story. About the house, about the years of sacrifice, about the text that shattered me. I laid bare the bank statements, the transfers, the manipulation. My voice cracked at times, but I didn't hide it. The truth deserved to be heard with all its wounds exposed. When Melanie spoke, her voice was venom cloaked in silk. She painted me as unstable, paranoid, an old woman lashing out because she couldn't let go of control. She said I was jealous of her place in David's life, that I had fabricated the financial discrepancies. But the evidence was stronger than her lies, and when the judge finally asked David to speak, the room fell silent. He shifted in his seat, glanced at Melanie, then at me. His lips parted, but no words came. His silence spoke louder than anything else. The gavel struck, the case dismissed. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I had been in years. Melanie's face burned red with fury, David's with shame, but neither chased me as I stepped into the sunlight. For the first time, I was free, not just legally, not just financially, but emotionally. The courtroom victory should have felt like an ending, but it wasn't. In truth, it was just another doorway. When I walked out that day, I carried no trophies, no cheers, no embraces. What I carried was freedom, the heavy kind, the kind that forces you to stand taller because no one else will hold you up. But freedom always comes with consequences. A week later, the whispers began. I heard them at the grocery store, at church, even at the community center, where I'd begun my pottery class. Did you hear what happened with Carolyn's son? They say she sued her own family. She must be so bitter, poor woman. Every word felt like a stone thrown at my back. They didn't know the truth. They didn't see the years of sacrifice, the quiet theft, the text that had cut me out of my own family. They only saw the scandal, and yet for once I didn't run to explain myself. I let the stones fall, because I knew the truth and I didn't need their approval to validate it. David stayed silent after the trial. No calls, no texts, nothing. I wondered if shame had swallowed him whole, or if Melanie had simply tightened her grip. But sometimes, late at night, I would picture him as a little boy climbing into my lap, with scraped knees and tear-streaked cheeks, and I felt the ache of loss so deeply it left me breathless. Grief and anger are twin sisters. Some nights I raged at him in my journal, scrawling words so sharp I could almost hear them tear the page. Other nights I cried softly into my pillow, whispering his name into the darkness. Both were necessary. Both were part of letting go. But life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. One afternoon, while I was kneeling in the garden pulling weeds, a car pulled up to the curb. I stood slowly brushing dirt from my hands and saw her, Melanie's sister Claire. We had met only a handful of times, polite encounters at holidays, nothing more. But now she looked at me with eyes that held both sorrow and urgency. "Can we talk?" she asked. I invited her in, poured her tea, and waited. She told me everything. How Melanie had always been controlling, always scheming, how she had a trail of broken friendships and unpaid debts behind her long before she met David. How she had bragged privately that she could wrap Carolyn around her finger because I was too lonely to say no. Each word landed like a hammer on the fragile glass of denial I still carried. Claire hesitated before her final confession. David knows more than he admits. He knew about some of the money. He didn't stop her. But he didn't start it either. He's weak, Carolyn, but he's not cruel. He's just lost. The ache in my chest deepened. I wanted to hate him, but hate is easy when the person is a stranger. When it's your child, hate is tangled with love, impossible to separate. Claire reached across the table, her voice soft. I thought you should know. You deserve the truth, even if it hurts. After she left, I sat in silence for hours, the tea long gone cold. I stared at the photographs still scattered around my home, David as a toddler, his wide smile unspoiled by life's shadows. I realized then that the boy I raised and the man he became were not the same, and maybe part of my healing was accepting that truth. The weeks rolled on. Without Melanie's siphoning, my accounts stabilized. Without their constant demands, my calendar opened. I filled it with new things: a watercolor class on Tuesdays, volunteering at the library on Thursdays, long walks by the river on quiet mornings. Slowly, life took shape again, not the life I had before, but one that was mine, wholly and unashamedly mine. And yet the story wasn't done. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold, I heard a knock on the door. My heart stumbled when I opened it. David stood there, alone. His face was thinner, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Mom, can I come in?" We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I had once cried over his text, the same place where I had first read the evidence of betrayal. Now it felt like neutral ground, a battlefield turned into a sanctuary. He spoke haltingly at first. "I know what Melanie did. I know you had every right to take the house back. I didn't stop her. I thought keeping the peace was better than standing up to her. And in the process, I lost you." His words cracked something inside me. I wanted to shout to tell him peace built on lies isn't peace at all, but instead I said quietly, "You didn't lose me, David. You gave me away. And I don't know if I can ever get that trust back." Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't argue. "I understand. I just wanted you to hear me say it." For the first time in months, I reached across the table and touched his hand. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. That night, after he left, I stepped out into the garden. The roses I had planted were blooming, their petals soft and bright against the twilight. I realized then that healing isn't a straight line. It's not anger one day and peace the next. It's a circle, messy and imperfect, looping back on itself, until little by little the sharp edges soften. And I knew this no matter what happened with David. I was no longer the woman who lived in silence. I was no longer the mother defined only by sacrifice. I was Carolyn Walker, survivor of betrayal, creator of her own life. The next chapter of my story was still unwritten, but for the first time, I was the one holding the pen. The night David came to me, something inside my heart shifted, but it wasn't enough to erase the scars. I knew healing wasn't just about him showing up with words. It had to come from me standing firm in the life I had rebuilt. Still, his visit stirred an old wound and reopened a question I thought I had buried. Could we ever truly repair what had been broken? That question lingered a few weeks until the next storm came crashing. I was returning from the library when I saw a figure waiting near my front gate. It was her, Melanie, dressed immaculately as always, but this time the sharp edges of her beauty looked worn. Her lipstick smudged her eyes, ringed dark with sleeplessness. She forced a smile as if we were old friends. "Carolyn," she began, "we need to talk." Every muscle in my body tensed. I wanted to slam the gate in her face, but something told me to let her speak. I stepped aside and she followed me to the porch, her heels clicking against the wooden boards. She wasted no time. "David is gone. He left me. He said he needed to think. He's staying with some coworker. You've poisoned him against me." I stared at her, disbelief and fury rising like a wave. "I didn't have to poison him, Melanie. The truth did that." Her smile faltered, and for a moment I saw the desperation beneath her mask. Then she leaned closer, her voice sharp. "You think you've won, don't you? But you'll always be alone. You'll never be enough for him. You couldn't even keep your husband, and now you think you can keep your son." The words sliced deep, but instead of bleeding, I felt something stronger steel. For years, I had let this woman dictate my place in my son's life, whispering poison, cutting me out, making me beg for scraps of family connection. Not anymore. I stood tall, meeting her gaze. "You may have fooled him once, but you don't scare me anymore. This house, my life, my worth, none of it belongs to you. Leave, Melanie, and don't come back." For a heartbeat, her mask cracked, and I saw the rage boiling underneath. But she turned sharply, heels striking like hammers as she stormed away. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake thinking of all the years lost, the holidays stolen, the love twisted. My grief was sharp, but beneath it pulsed a deeper strength. I realized then that the final confrontation wasn't about her. It was about me finally claiming my place without fear. A week later, I was invited to a church fundraiser. I almost declined, worried about the whispers still surrounding me, but something in me said go. I dressed in my best blue dress, tied my hair back, and walked in with my head high. The room fell silent for a moment. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, some curious, some judgmental, others sympathetic. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to smile. And then from across the room I saw David. He looked startled to see me, but after a pause he walked over. The crowd seemed to hold its breath as he reached me. "Mom," he said softly, "I want you to meet someone." A young woman stepped forward, nervous but kind-eyed. "This is Anna," he said. She's been helping me through all of this." Anna extended her hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Walker." For a second, my old bitterness threatened to rise. Another woman stepping into his life. Another chance for me to be pushed aside. But this time I took a deep breath and looked closer. Her smile was genuine, her hand warm. I realized she wasn't a replacement. She wasn't competition. She was simply part of his healing. And in that moment I felt a strange release. Later, after the event, David walked me to my car. The night air was cool, stars scattered like diamonds. "Mom," he whispered, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to earn it. I don't want to lose you again." I touched his face gently the way I had when he was small. "It will take time," I said, "but time is all we need if we use it well." As he nodded, tears shining in his eyes, I realized this was the climax of my story. Not a courtroom battle, not a bitter exchange at my gate, but this standing with my son under the open sky, both of us raw, broken, and yet reaching for each other through the shards. The next day, Melanie called. Her voice was brittle, desperate. "David won't answer me. Please, Carolyn. Tell him I love him. Tell him." I hung up. I didn't need her poison anymore. I didn't need her chaos. My story was no longer tied to her games. In the quiet that followed, I stepped into my garden once again. The roses were fuller now, their fragrance drifting in the evening breeze. I knelt, pressed my hands into the soil, and smiled. Because in that soil I saw the truth: from pain can come beauty. From betrayal can grow resilience. And from endings, beginnings can bloom. Christmas arrived again, and with it came a strange mixture of dread and hope. I decorated the house quietly, hanging ornaments that had once filled our family tree. Each one carried a memory. Tiny hands, clumsy with glitter, laughter spilling across the living room, David begging for just one more candy cane. Those echoes used to hurt, but this year they felt different. They weren't just reminders of what I had lost. They were proof of the love that had once lived here, and maybe still could. On Christmas Eve, I heard a knock at the door. My heart leapt, though I tried to steady myself. When I opened it, David stood there. No Melanie at his side, no storm in his eyes, just my son looking uncertain but determined. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. I stepped aside, my voice caught in my throat. He walked into the living room, taking in the decorations, the smell of cinnamon candles, the warmth of the fire. For a long moment he just stood there, his eyes glistening. "This feels like home," he whispered. Tears blurred my vision. "It is home, David. It always has been." He sat down on the couch, and for the first time in years, we spoke without walls between us. He told me about the weight he had carried, how Melanie had filled his ears with lies, how guilt had chained him even when he doubted her. He admitted his shame for the cruel things he had said, for the years he had shut me out. "I don't expect you to forget," he said. "But I need you to know I see it now. I see everything you gave up for me, everything you endured, and I'm sorry." I reached for his hand, my fingers trembling. "I don't want perfection, David. I just want honesty. I just want you." The clock chimed midnight, and suddenly it was Christmas morning. For the first time in so long, I wasn't alone. My son was beside me. And in that moment, I realized forgiveness wasn't a single act, it was a choice renewed each day. And I was ready to choose it, because choosing it meant choosing life, love, and a future untethered from bitterness. Days turned into weeks, and our bond slowly mended. Melanie eventually faded from our lives, her calls unanswered, her manipulations powerless. The silence she left behind was not emptiness, it was peace. I returned to my routines, but everything felt lighter. I walked the garden and saw not just roses, but resilience. I attended church and no longer shrank from whispers. I looked in the mirror and finally recognized myself again, not just a mother defined by sacrifice, not just a woman scarred by betrayal, but Carolyn strong-whole and still capable of joy. Months later, David invited me to dinner at his new home. My heart raced as I approached, fearing echoes of the rejection that once crushed me. But when I stepped inside, I was greeted by warmth. Anna, the kind woman he had introduced before, welcomed me with open arms. Together, they had built something honest, something hopeful. At the table, laughter bubbled like it used to when he was a boy. For a fleeting moment, I closed my eyes and let myself believe in miracles. Not the kind that erase the past, but the kind that give you strength to face it and still move forward. That night, as I returned home, I lingered on the porch beneath the stars. I thought of all the wounds, all the tears, all the nights I begged God for answers. And I realized this was the answer. Not a perfect family, not a life without scars, but a love reborn, tested by fire, made stronger through pain. I want you to know, if you're listening to my story, that family betrayal can feel like the deepest cut. It can make you doubt yourself, your worth, even your ability to go on. But healing is possible. Sometimes it comes in ways you least expect. Sometimes it takes years. But the heart, though fragile, can carry more than you ever believe. So this is what I leave you with. Never let someone else's cruelty define your worth. Never let betrayal steal the power of your love. Stand tall even when the world tries to push you down. Because in the end, your strength, your dignity, your truth, those are things no one can take. And when life finally circles back, when reconciliation or justice comes, you will stand ready. Not as the broken one, but as the survivor. If my story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that remind us we're never truly alone. And don't forget to leave a comment. I'd love to know your thoughts, your experiences, or simply that you were here with me.